I want you all to explore with me. If I'm trying to make this argument, or not even an argument, but if I'm trying to express that God is just really setting us up for failure in order for us to see the difference between our choices and the choices that he gave us, we probably would be in a better position if we decided to exercise these choices. Hey, welcome back to Dear Creator, or welcome to Dear Creator. I am Danny Daniela, and today's question is about suffering, pleasures, and sacrifices. What if God is setting us up for failure by giving us the opportunity for free will? So just recently, I had a conversation with someone that I admire, appreciate in my life, and the idea was about failure. That sometimes we don't go after these things because we feel like somebody might spam us or someone may do us wrong, and then we stay paralyzed and we don't do anything. But the objective is to try something, to fail, so that you can learn something new. And so each video from this point on, I hope that it's positioned to you all in a way that encourages you to think and to maybe get it wrong, but to explore and be critical thinkers. Because I don't have all the answers, I don't know, but I appreciate the opportunity to think. And I'm at the position in my life right now where I don't need the answers to all of my questions like I thought I did. I am here for the experience of presenting these quality questions or critical questions, or maybe even sometimes silly questions, to see if it'll get me closer to understanding other people outside of my world, or even understanding myself. My aspect of diversity, equity, and inclusion is about our belief systems, identifying all the diverse belief systems, and then coming to a table and learning whether or not we connect more than we are different, or learning why people think the way that they do, so that we don't pass this judgment from a limited perspective or view. So friends, I want to share with you a video that inspired today's conversation about sacrifices, suffering, and pleasure. So let me just position this question to you all, because this question is ultimately the question I want you all to explore with me today in this video. What if God could have reduced our suffering by asking us to sacrifice our pleasures? Now, let's look at this first video, which I shared with you all in our last video, but I want us to look at this video because this was the inspiration for today's conversation. And I definitely want to give credit to such an interesting conversation brought to us by Kristian A. Smith and his panel.
I'm going to get straight to the bullshit. Here we go.
The part of helping people to not listen to false doctrine and false teaching.
Pay attention to when people say false doctrine. Well, who gets to determine what is false? If we say harmful, you to determine what is harmful to you. But when they say false, they determine for you what is false. So they say false doctrine, meaning anything outside of what I teach you.
To be able to discern, the kinds of churches they go through, is that I think people have to learn how to suffer well.
What the hell does suffering well even mean, Jackie?
Is she telling us we're supposed to like it? Because I want her to address that as the kink that it is. Your kinkiness is showing.
If you don't tell people what you're talking about, they will put that suffering that you speak of and that you're trying to passive aggressively shame them about, they will take that and put that in whatever context they're in. So if they're in an abusive relationship, hearing you talk about suffering well, maybe I just need to stick around. Or I'm in some other form of harmful situation that I have the power to get out of, that I have the power to seek help for. And then I hear you tell me that I don't love God and I'm abandoning the safety of God because I don't suffer well. Leave me out of it. Because if suffering well looks like what you're doing, baby, you unraveling at the seams and you don't even know it.
Because I really think that's a big part of all of this. When you even look at scripture, like they chose other gods because they were unwilling to wait. They were unwilling to trust. They were unwilling to depend, right? Like, I don't know where to go. Let me go to the psychic. I don't know what to do. Let me trust in the golden calf because Moses is up there too long. Like the neediness drives them to idols versus dependence.
The expression misery loves company. Please stop including us in your self-loathing. I know what she is trying to cope through, and she's not doing a good job at it.
And I feel like if we don't learn how to suffer with God, we're going to leave him.
The theology of suffering is a setup for abuse. If somebody is telling you that your relationship to God is connected to how much you are able to suffer, they are setting you up for abuse because they're making your relationship with God abusive. So if your relationship with God is abusive, then you're going to get into abusive relationships with other people.
Because life is hard.
Yeah.
Universally, it doesn't matter. Like, how many people have become atheists because life got too hard and you weren't going to trust them?
Suffering is a fact. You know, we go through things in life. But what I've discovered is the people who I've encountered that have suffered have come out on the other side with a level of humility. But it's only the people who have been at war with themselves and suffering that they chose that have come out with a pompous attitude. And it's obvious that she has been in war with herself. And she's in suffering that she chose, because instead of coming out with humility to encourage, she comes out with doctrine to Lord and say, this is how you should make meaning, as opposed to offering people hope when they get to the other side and celebrating their survival. Because suffering well is not a thing, but surviving suffering is. And so what I want to do is, to the people on this platform, if you've gone through suffering, I'm so glad you made it, because honestly, all the suffering I've been through, I did not want to go through. And if I could go back, I would not have gone through. I celebrate the fact that I survived it. And that is where I find my faith and my hope and my joy that I came out on the other side and I'm alive.
And then there was a praise dance at the end. I spent probably way too much time trying to unravel this content. And I'm still inspired by it, creating more content. So I want to thank Kristian A. Smith. I want to thank his panel. I want to thank Jackie Hill Perry for bringing this conversation to the table. Because initially when I was watching the video, the first thing, or the first response I received in my body was, okay, so we are now talking about religion. We all have different perspective on how to define suffering. And we are now making it seem like one person is responsible for how people think, receive information. And there's a group of people who are at the will of anybody's doctrine. And with this, we have to go back and forth and maybe blame a person in the limited understanding of how they perceived it based off of how we received the information, and then make them to be maybe the scapegoat of our teaching. I don't know if any of those words made sense, but if they did, thank you for understanding. But I'm not sure if it makes sense, but that's really how I received it. I just thought that maybe the panel was going a little bit too hard. And the reason why I thought they were going hard is because I'm understanding that people are in different environments and they have different ideologies, and the way that they receive or understand a word could be totally different than someone else's belief system on how they understand that word. So the phrase here at hand is suffering well. And as one of the panelists has mentioned, what does that mean? I had that same question. What does suffering well mean? Because suffering at one point seemed very unnecessary. Like, why do we have to have this suffering? Can we enjoy life? Can life be happy? To you all, what is the opposite of suffering? When you hear it without looking it up, when you think about suffering, what is your definition of suffering? I want to just say that I am appreciative of Jackie Hill Perry, Kristian A. Smith and his panel for bringing this conversation to the table. Initially, when I received this content in my feed, I thought, I think they are having a very, very strong conversation, making a lot of assumptions and putting a lot of blame on Jackie Hill's way of thinking, her framework, without having her in the room. Apparently, none of these people are in this room, so I want to make that clear that Jackie Hill isn't here, Kristian A isn't here, none of the panelists are here. So I am receiving this content just based off of response, just like they did. But when I saw a few people talking about this particular message, I thought, one thing I would probably need to do is find the source and see if there's anything that was communicated that would help me understand what she meant by suffering well. Because they had a question, what does suffering well even mean, Jackie? And I have the same question. What does suffering well mean? And I thought, okay, if I went to the passage itself, then maybe if it wasn't a clip, I could see the full context, which some of us might not exercise. When we see a clip, we might just get angry or mad and upset or even inspired without even having the full context of the message. Do we have time to get the full context of every single person's message? Probably not. But I would suggest, or maybe even consider, when we decide to have very strong emotions about something, that maybe not only do we get the full context, but we start to think about what are the different perspectives that we could be missing, any of our biases, what are some questions that we can consider for the author of the message. So like they did here very well, their question was, what does that mean? But they also started to make assumptions throughout the video where I thought, perhaps we should bring Jackie Hill to this conversation with them. I would love it. There are a lot of conversations that I want to see on the internet. I want to see Jackie Hill Perry and Kristian A. Smith communicate together, because as I've seen it, maybe 2 pieces of content, he used Jackie Hill as a reference. And I thought, I've seen Jackie Hill Perry's content before, and I didn't receive it the same way that Kristian A. Smith received it, which tells me that we all are receiving content in different ways. And so sometimes I could make an assumption that when I look at Jackie Hill Perry content or Kristian A. Smith content, that people are seeing it the same way that I see it. I actually see how there's a mirror between the two. Some ways they're doing the same thing, but they are advocating for their voice and then putting down the other voice. That's what I see. But nevertheless, that was not the point. I just wanted to show you all that this is my inspiration. I already did a long video talking about Kristian A. Smith's content. And so you guys can check that out if you have time to spend, because it's an hour or something like that. Way too much time. But here I am practicing in America, thinking about things. What happened here is I thought about some keywords: suffering, pleasure, and sacrifice. At first, it was just pleasure and suffering. How do we define suffering? What is the opposite of suffering? What do we want to get from this life? Why do we want suffering to stop? What does it actually even mean to us from our belief systems, our core belief systems, whether that is a faith system or not? Then I wanted to understand pleasure. Are we looking for pleasure? Is it bad to have pleasure? What in the world is the problem or issue when it comes to faith and Christianity? When it comes to pleasure. And then this is what happened. There's a piece of content from the Diary of a CEO, and it features this doctor, and he's talking about pleasure. So I want to share this clip with you all, and hopefully you guys can join me on this ride, because I'm going to share a few pieces of content that's outside of faith. It's talking about hormones, but just stick with me and see if you can put the pieces together like I did. Okay, so this is from the podcast with the Diary of a CEO.
Is visceral. You feel it in your body. Happiness is ethereal. You feel it above the neck. Pleasure is taking, like from a casino. Happiness is giving, like Habitats for Humanity. Pleasure is experienced alone. Happiness is usually experienced in social groups. Pleasure can be achieved with substances. Happiness cannot be achieved with substances. The extremes of pleasure, whether they be substances or behaviors, so substances like cocaine, amphetamine, nicotine, alcohol, sugar, or behaviors, shopping, gambling, social media, internet gaming, pornography. In the extreme, all lead to addiction. There's an aholic after every one of those: shopaholic, sexaholic, chocoholic, alcoholic, etc. But there's no such thing as being addicted to too much happiness. And lastly, number 7, the one that is the reason for the book: pleasure is dopamine, happiness is serotonin. And they are not the same. So 2 different neurotransmitters, 2 different sets of receptors, two different areas of the brain, two different mechanisms of action, two different clearance mechanisms. Dopamine is an excitatory neurotransmitter.
What does that mean?
Means when dopamine is released in the area of the reward center, the nucleus accumbens, it's an actual anatomic structure in the brain which you can see on imaging. When dopamine is released there and it binds to its receptor, like so, you get you transduce the feelings of reward. Okay, and reward is good. Reward is what gets you out of bed in the morning. If you don't have reward, basically you shrivel up and die. Okay, reward is essential to the survival of the species. Orgasm is reward. Okay, you need it. Mm-hmm. It's part of daily life. But too much reward is a different story. And the reason is because dopamine, because it's an excitatory neurotransmitter, it causes the next cell to fire. Well, if it causes the next cell to fire and fire and fire, that cell dies. Neurons want to be tickled, not bludgeoned. Chronic overstimulation of any neuron leads to neuronal cell death. So that postsynaptic neuron with the dopamine receptor, it's got a plan B. It's got a way of mitigating that negative response. It downregulates the receptor. So now, more dopamine, less receptors, less chance that a molecule will find a receptor to bind to. Well, that means the gain, the amplitude on the reward is going down. More and more for less and less. The law of diminishing returns.
Like an addiction, like a...
Tolerance.
Yeah.
Tolerance is one half of addiction. And then when the neurons do start to die, that is addiction. Exactly right. So dopamine drives addiction. And it doesn't matter what the cause of the dopamine release is. In the extreme, it will be addictive. Now, serotonin does not downregulate its own receptor because it's not an excitatory neurotransmitter. It's an inhibitory one. So do you need to downregulate an inhibitory response? No.
An inhibitory means what?
Well, it means puts the next neuron to rest.
Okay.
Instead of stimulating, instead of firing, it's actually calming.
Okay.
Right? So there's no such thing as being addicted to too much happiness because the receptors are still there. But there's one thing that downregulates serotonin, and that's dopamine. So the more pleasure you seek, the more unhappy you get. And we've been told for the last 100 years that pleasure is happiness.
What y'all think about that? I'm so curious about what y'all are thinking. Let me know in the comments. What are your ideas? Are you making any connections? Because when I seen this piece, I seen it actually months ago. And then I seen this content about suffering just recently. And then from there, I saw content about pleasure from Kristian A. Smith as well, but I couldn't find the content. But I saw a theme that, yes, just like me, I am questioning this suffering as it relates to faith. Like, what in the world do we need all this suffering for how long? When do we opt out? How do we know that we're doing it the right way? So when Jackie enters the chat with suffering well, there's an idea that you can do this the right way. When I'm thinking about this content about dopamine and serotonin, I think about what is the opposite of suffering, that we obtain a happiness or joy, but attaining it with serotonin versus dopamine are two different experiences. So when a person is pleasured, and they're pleasured in a way where it satisfies them, it feels good, but their body responds and says, this is now an addiction that does not feel well, versus something that is sustained or contentment or joy where you have serotonin, so you're reaching this joy. There's a somewhat called pleasure there, but it doesn't make it so that you have to be in an addictive state in order to experience the joy. I'm not the doctor here, so I can't put all the big words together. So hopefully my simple talking will be somewhat understood. But what I gathered from these two pieces of content was, wow, we sometimes think, get more, get more, get more. I want to be pleasured. I want to be satisfied. I don't want any suffering. without thinking of suffering well. I don't have a clear understanding on how Jackie would interpret and suffering well, or how people receive it. But in my interpretation of suffering well, I would consider sacrifice. So this is when sacrifice enters the chat and it goes into my mind, because sacrifice now puts me in a position to say, in order for me to enjoy happiness or for my body to respond in a positive manner when there is some suffering happening, I have to put my body in the best position. I have to set myself up for success with the choices I make. So when it comes to pleasure or the things that make me feel good, if I perceive that toxic food or a drug or packaged products, what is it? It's not another word. Oh, it's a word that everybody knows. I can't. What is the processed food? Boom, boom, bam. If I perceive or understand that I like processed food, it makes me feel good. Like, that's joy and that's pleasure. But my body responds and says, okay, you can have this choice. You can continue to eat this processed food, but just know that there's a response that we're going to have in your body, and it might stunt your growth in other ways. But continue, do what you want to do. On the other hand, I might not initially think, oh, walking 20K steps a day is my pleasure until I try it. And then when I try it, I see that my body responds to it in a healthier way. Or drinking a gallon of water, my body receives it in a healthier way. So then there's not only a relationship I create with my brain and my body to have this happiness within my flesh, but I'm also understanding there's a difference between the pleasure that I thought I wanted and the pleasure or the happiness that comes from making the decisions that my body actually responds to in a positive way. Hopefully I'm hidden somewhere, because I feel it in my body that I am, but I don't know if it's sitting well. So when I'm looking at this content, I'm thinking, okay, we have pleasure, we have suffering, we have sacrifice. There's some sacrifices that we have to make about the choices that we decide on, because the sacrifice is I have to sacrifice what I believe is going to be good and pleasurable versus what it actually is. Now, this leans to truth. Now, for a moment in time, there are some choices that we can make, like eating something that's so-called unhealthy for us, that in that time, for that moment, feels good. It did pleasure us. But there's also a truth that there was a healthier decision that not only would benefit our body in the long run, but we would benefit from it because our perspective or understanding of what is actually good is now revealed to us because we make these new choices. From here, I'm gonna, maybe if I share this next video, it'll start to make things fall into place and you guys will follow me through this journey. But ultimately, I want you all to explore with me. If I'm trying to make this argument, or not even an argument, but if I'm trying to express that God is just really setting us up for failure in order for us to see the difference between our choices and the choices that he gave us, we probably would be in a better position if we decided to exercise these choices. My relationship with the Bible itself is I'm looking for patterns. I'm looking for, if I practice that, is that true? Does it always happen this way? Are there stories being told that are mirroring each other when it comes to what is in the word? Are those testimonies enough? Do I need to see an actual miracle? Or is it the fact that there are different people from different places telling the same story about their relationship with the Bible? And I also have my own relationship and journey with the Bible. That's how I approach the text and how I approach the faith. Is I believe in the knowledge that's being drawn from our personal experiences because we're living this life. Most of the time when people say, go read a book, those books are written by people who experienced, who observed. We also have the scientific method, which includes observation. Some of those observations are from the experiment itself. And in that experiment itself, you can get a panel of people, have questions, and get discovery. But here's the kicker. Some people could be lying. Some people can be pulling their experiences or ideas from a hurt place. Some people can be pulling their experiences and ideas from a distorted or manipulated place. So then you have to filter through and go through another set of questions to really get to, is this true or is this false? Now, when it comes to understanding the wisdom in the Bible that can be applied to our lives. There's wisdom in the Bible that seems a little bit extreme. Like, I don't think that we should not have to name one of the laws in the Old Testament.
Oh, la 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 la. No, thank you.
Because that's not today. I don't have any say there. But when I look at Proverbs itself and it says a soft answer turns away wrath, and I exercise that more times than none, do I see the result? Is it turning away wrath when I attempt to sincerely implement a soft answer? So then we can use that as evidence. Okay, these set of words are helpful. The way that these words are positioned are helpful. And so when we think about the content that we're consuming, that might be something to consider. When I'm receiving this content, what is the ultimate goal of the messenger? Are they trying to get people to get on their side? What does the messenger gain from this content? Is it self-gratification? Is it the fact that people can worship or follow them? What do you gain from the message? And how do you feel when you receive the message? Do you feel like you just agree? You feel good about it? Do you feel like you're a part of groupthink? Do you feel like you're an individual thinker and you also question? Are there any perspectives that you even consider when you're receiving the message? I think those are all questions that we can bring to the conversation. Now let's watch this next clip. Now this is a clip from a woman who's talking about sugar addictions. And I'm going to try to bring this home because the sugar addiction is one of the pleasures that we can have, right? Let her talk about it. I'm gonna let her talk about it.
Cut sugar is because your body will switch fuel. What would happen if you give up sugar for 2 weeks? The first thing you would notice is that your face would change. It would go from being rounded and puffy to a more slender, sleek face. The reason you lose weight when you cut sugar is because your body will switch fuel sources and start to burn fat cells. Body fat and sugar are the 2 primary fuel sources for your body, and given the opportunity, your body would rather burn sugar instead of fat. When you deprive your body of added sugar, you give it a chance to burn stored fat. Starting with your liver, 4 of your organs benefit significantly from cutting sugar. First, your eyes improve as sugar deteriorates the retina, leading to conditions like diabetic retinopathy. Second, your kidneys suffer less inflammation, reducing issues like sugar or protein in your urine and severe cases of diabetic neuropathy. Third, your arteries heal from sugar-induced damage, lowering the risk of vascular disease and improving cholesterol levels. Lastly, your brain and nerves benefit. Reducing sugar decreases inflammation, improves cognitive function, and alleviates numbness in your toes, enhancing your mood and overall brain health. If it is hard for you to give sugar up, consider having an herb that can detox completely and boost the proliferation of mitochondria in stem cells to remove sugar from your body. Moringa is the tree that I recommend when people usually ask me to help them lose weight and boost energy. The only brand I use is Rosabella, and I've linked the product in TikTok shop so you don't have to find it.
Okay, she linked the product in TikTok shop so you don't have to find it. And I know that seems like a simple line to advertise a product, but I just want to make it clear that everything I gathered from this particular clip is direction, guidance, and understanding. So when we think about that first video, we get an understanding of the difference between serotonin and dopamine. We understand that we want to be in a good mood, that we want to be motivated, that we want to have those feel goods, but we also understand that serotonin is something that's more sustained and there's contentment there. And that when it relates to our relationship with suffering in this earth or in this world, whether it's from a religious lens or a non-religious lens or any other spiritual aspect, is to suffer well probably means to have an understanding of the position you can put yourself in if you use the tools or the wisdom that may or may not be available to you. So when I say may or may not be available to you, it brings me to this last conversation that I want to share with you. This is the application for me, because although I did not go out and have a big experiment or even bring this to myself, I understand that sometimes when I'm stuck on a topic or I want to get a better understanding of a topic, the topic seems to manifest itself in my real life. And so I was able to get an interview with a young lady who told me her story about reaching 300 pounds and how she came to these 2 decisions. pretty much life or death. She had to choose life, and the way she chose life was to pick a different relationship with food. So although I won't be able to share the entire clip with you all, I want to share some clips from our segment and make it a gamified experience. Okay, what I want to do is I want to share some of the quotes, and hopefully if you are interested, there is a link in the description so you can listen to the full podcast. But I want to use some of her quotes, and I want to present a question to you all based off of the quotes that she shared. So here's the first one from our experience together, and I'm going to play this for you all now.
My relationship with food was very disconnected from consequence. Like, I had noticed that when I would eat, like, my belief system was very malleable, like, especially around food. Like, I could eat something that was unhealthy, or like, because I wouldn't say that I was like addicted to fast food, or like, from most people's outside perspective, I didn't even really seem that out of control, but it was like a very deep disconnection from the truth, like, which was, like, I also had that like belief system in my head. I'm like, some people are just kind of born to be fat. And I mean, I don't think I was born to be thin, but at the same time, like, if you're at a point where it's hard to run or hard to walk or hard to jump, nobody is born to live a life where it's hard to walk, run, or jump, because every human is supposed to be able to kind of be mobile, right? So you can't say like, well, I was just born like fat, because you're supposed to be able to be mobile, like, unless there's some other issue, like, there's pretty much no excuse for that. Like, it sounds harsh, but like, that's kind of just how I talk about it for myself. But I was you also have to understand, like, I was, I do genuinely believe that every person is doing the best they can under their level of consciousness. Like, so, if I was in that state and somebody was trying to say like if before I got sick, someone like a time traveler was like, you need to change the way that you need to change your habits, because you're about to be deathly ill and you're about to risk everything. Like, you could lose your ability to speak, you could lose your ability to see, to move. If you came back and would have told me that, it wouldn't have done anything for me, because I do believe that people can only hear you from their current level of consciousness. And consciousness is like, it's impossible to perceive a higher realm of consciousness until you have done the work to get there. And that's kind of what I mean about like the spirit realms. Like, you have to work to get there, and you can't just perceive it or believe it until you're there. But it was, my life did have a lot of joy then too. Like, I've always had a lot of joy, because I've always wanted to be like a loving person and put a lot of love into my relationships. And, I've always had a firm belief that I'm still worth something, like, no matter how desirable or undesirable I am, like, or what my abilities are. And that has always carried me through with a lot of joy in my life, and I got to the point where I even thought, maybe I can just go on forever like this, because I still have fun, right? So I was like, I could just go on forever like this, until the universe brings me to my knees. And I do believe that, only some people are lucky or blessed enough to be brought to their knees by the universe, and they get to come out on the other side. And like, that, some people could choose to look at an experience like that and think, wow, like, that was so much time wasted, or so much was lost. But it just changed everything. It was just so humbling. Like nothing can take that away.
When I had this conversation with my guest Sarah, this is just a snippet of what we discussed, but there was a theme that her relationship with food was disconnected from consequences. And she also mentioned how she felt joy, and she still even put herself in a position to persuade herself that she can keep going on this way because of the joy she was feeling. And immediately I'm thinking to myself, this makes sense. This whole conversation about suffering and pleasure, it makes sense, especially as I hear her telling her story, that she had to get brought to her knees to even make a change when it came to her decision on healthy eating versus the choices that she was making. And you'll see this if you listen to the podcast. She never mentioned that, she thought that she was doing something bad or anything of that nature when it comes to eating these foods, but she realized that she didn't have a trust in healthy eating because there wasn't a consistency in the land when it came to her upbringing. So there's a good point in the message where she shares that her school system would bring in a healthy eating assembly once a year, and the school line was pizza or other unhealthy foods. Now, granted, I am not a health coach or can tell you that you cannot eat pizza and that's going to be detrimental to your life. But the idea is if we start to see some consistency where eating certain foods is causing us to be obese or eating certain foods is causing us to get into disorders, then there has to be a point where we start to match it, where like, I keep eating this and my body is responding in a way that doesn't help me. It makes it harder for me to do things that I want to do, which then is going to relate to suffering. Is there any other choice for me? And as a child, she mentioned that people would comment about her weight, but they would never give her applicable tools to use. And I believe when it comes to this faith journey and any other journey that we have when we're trying to better ourselves, is we might not have the tools. We might not know absolutely what to do, but there are hints around us. There are experiences around us that's given us clues. And we have this opportunity and option to say, I want to try that until I fail so much that I start to win. So it brings me back to the beginning of this conversation where I mentioned that I had this discussion about being afraid of failure and not knowing the answer and that having so much confusion. And the wisdom imparted on me was the people that got to the answer, the conclusion, they failed a lot. And so I consider you and friends as people who are interested in failing. And maybe you won't get the absolute answer, but through this journey, you'll find your rhythm and you'll find that some people are going to have different ideas than yours, and it doesn't make theirs right or yours wrong, but it makes it that they are trying their best. And this is how I see both pieces of content here, and all the content here is that people, they study what they're passionate about because they have a relationship to their experience. And so they are going to be more versed in one part of the life than another. We all have an option to choose which part of the life we want to be an advocate in. And so for me, it's thinking on the good. It's looking at different perspectives. It's attempting to see what it feels like to operate in the fullest joy. And right now I see guidance and wisdom in the scriptures that help me with that, and that I haven't seen in other places. And I also make room that people outside of faith in the Bible might find different solutions for them, because really, I don't have the answer. I do not know the absolute answer. I feel confident, but I do not have the absolute answer. So with that being said, I knew I was going to turn that into a game, but I just realized that there are a lot of things that I wanted to share with you all from that podcast, and I'll do it in sections. But the only question that I want to leave with you all based off of what I shared from Sarah's experiences, how often do you feel disconnected from your actions and consequences? Are there any areas in your lives where your beliefs justify harmful behavior? So again, we're thinking about our own personal lives. We have to go in, friends. Okay, we're going within ourselves to answer this question. Ultimately, do we have a belief system that suggests that harmful behavior is okay? Now, based on where we are in the room and which angle we're sitting at the table, We might believe that our belief system isn't causing any harmful behavior, and the person over there, theirs is the one causing harmful behavior. But perhaps if you looked at it from their angle, they might see that the way that you present your data or your story is causing harmful behavior. Maybe not, but I just want us to make room to consider that we might not have the ultimate truth, and the way that we position it could also be harmful. As I read some of these messages or I experience with some of this content online, I get it. I get that we feel passionate and we are hurt and things just don't make sense. But I also feel that the other people that we are judging also are in the same experience where they don't know the answer and they believe in what they believe in based off of their core belief systems. And sometimes it takes all of us sitting down, having some time to answer questions like the ones I presented to you all today, or questions that you have for yourself. I want us to really just challenge our own belief systems. Doesn't mean that you have to be against your belief system, but just understand as much as you can about your belief system and then practice, how do I communicate my belief system in a way that doesn't appear harmful? Maybe from your perspective, it's not harmful in the way you deliver it and you can deliver it however you want to. But if we're trying to build relationships and we're trying to connect, is there an easier way? Or is there, it might not be easy, is there a more creative way that we can use? And challenge yourself to do so, or not. Maybe you just came to the end of this video just because. But I'm going to end it here. And I'm going to play a game with you all on the next video because this video will be too long if I did it again. And I'm practicing trying to at least get under the hour. So today is going to be 45 minutes. And thank you all for sharing your time with me. Until next time, hold on to you as much as you can. Hold on to your health, your well-being, and your mind. Be mindful. Bye.